Welcome to part 2 of chapter 1, the human organism. In this video, I discuss the process of homeostasis. I will discuss why it's important for normal body function, and it will include the negative feedback systems and the positive feedback systems. Homeostasis is a condition of equilibrium. It is the existence and maintenance of a relatively constant environment within the body, despite any external or internal influences. This slide shows that even though it can be hot or cold outside, our normal body temperature resides around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Why is homeostasis important? The survival of body cells depend on the precise regulation of the chemical composition of their surrounding fluid. Homeostasis allows small fluctuations around a set point. So, for example, with the temperature of our bodies, it is completely normal to have a 98.9 body temperature. And even though it's a little bit higher than 98.6, we are still within a normal range. Now, what happens when homeostasis is disrupted by an internal or external environment? Homeostatic imbalances can occur. When homeostasis is disrupted, body conditions are outside the normal ranges. This can result in diseases, disorders, or even death. Factors such as your genetic makeup, the air you breathe, the food you eat, the thoughts you think, they all can affect your health. So it's very important that our body maintains homeostasis. There are two ways that maintain homeostasis. The most common way our body maintains homeostasis is through something called the negative feedback loop. Nearly every system, every example that we have in our body follows this path, the negative feedback loop. Our body also uses something called the positive feedback loop, but there are only a few examples of this. Now, to begin, there are three components of all feedback loops. The first is a receptor. This monitors a value of some variable by detecting stimuli around us. In the example of the body temperature, this would be a thermoreceptor monitoring the temperature. The second is a control center. This part determines the set point and receives input about the variable from the receptor. Nearly always, the control center is our brain. The third component of a feedback loop is the effector. This is the structure or structures that generates the response that adjusts the values of the changed variable. Now we'll go over the most common feedback loop, the negative feedback system. In this system, a disrupted condition is reversed, and then it is returned to normal. So if we look at the little image to the left, we can say, excuse me, some stimulus happens. So say the outside temperature is 120 degrees outside. That is going to cause our body temperature to increase because of the heat around us. There is a receptor called a thermoreceptor that detects changes in our temperature. It then detects this change and sends information to the control center. The information is called the input. The control center is our brain. It receives that information and then makes a decision on how to fix this. So when we're hot, we sweat. So the brain then sends information called output to an effector organ. The effector organ, in this case, are our sweat glands. So the brain sends output to these sweat glands to say, sweat. And the response is sweating, which helps to decrease the temperature of the body. So with negative feedback, there's something that is off, and our body does something to return it back to a normal position. Here's another picture that shows how our body temperature uses the negative feedback system. So receptors in the skin detect increased temperature. They send input to the brain, which is the control center, which integrates that information and decides that sweating will help the situation. So it sends output to the effectors, which are the sweat glands, to produce sweat. Once that happens, the body temperature cools. So the body no longer has to let the brain know that it's too hot, and the sweating stops. Positive feedback systems are much more rare in our bodies. A positive feedback system continuously increases the disruption until some sort of event or mechanism interrupts it. It seems very strange because we make the change worse. Let's go through the example of childbirth. So childbirth and clotting are both examples in our body that uses a positive feedback system. So with childbirth, uterine contractions initiate the process of labor. The contractions push the baby downwards against the cervix. The cervix is the lower part of the uterus that the baby has to enter in order to then go into the vagina and be delivered. The pressure of the baby against the cervix causes stretching of the cervix, which is the controlled condition that is disrupted. Stretch receptors in the cervix detect the change. These receptors send an input via some nerves to the brain. The brain interprets this and sends the output of releasing the hormone oxytocin. Oxytocin works on the uterine muscles, which are the effectors, and the response is to contract the uterine muscles more, causing more uterine contractions. So we're making it worse. This forces the baby further down into the cervix, stretching the cervix more. Then that causes, again, the brain to release or cause the release of more oxytocin, which then causes more uterine contractions. This process continues to get worse and worse and worse until the baby is delivered. In conclusion, we discussed the process of homeostasis. We included why it is important for normal body function and discussed both the negative and positive feedback systems.